The door didn't slam. It closed with control. That was the first thing Nia Carter noticed. Not panic, not confusion. Control. Adrian Wolfe stepped into the penthouse like a man who expected everything inside it to obey him, including silence. His coat was still on, his presence sharp, untouched by whatever world he had just come from. Then he saw her, barefoot, standing near the center of his living room, like she had been there long enough to stop asking permission. His eyes didn't settle on her first. They moved past her, to the crib, to the small movement inside it, to the child. Everything in him paused, but only for a second. Then it hardened. "You've got 5 seconds, Adrian said, voice low, steady, dangerous in the way it didn't need to rise, "to explain why you're in my home before I call security." Nia didn't answer, didn't rush, didn't even look surprised. She turned her head slightly, just enough to glance at him, not like a stranger caught in the wrong place, but like someone confirming something she had already suspected. Then she faced him fully. "That's your son." No build-up, no hesitation, just truth, placed directly between them. For a moment, nothing moved. Not the air, not the city outside the glass, not even Adrian. Then a quiet sound broke through it all, a soft cry, small, uncertain. The baby shifted in the crib, his face tightening as the silence stretched too long. And just like that, the moment changed. Nia moved first, not toward Adrian, toward the child. She reached in, gentle, practiced, lifting him with a familiarity that didn't ask for approval. Adrian didn't follow her, didn't speak, but something in his posture shifted, just slightly, because whatever this was, it wasn't fear standing in front of him, and that made it worse. Adrian let out a quiet breath, but there was no calm in it. "No," he said, flat, immediate, final. "That's not possible." Nia adjusted the baby against her shoulder, her hand resting lightly on his back, as she soothed him without thinking. The child settled slowly, his breathing evening out like this wasn't the first time she had done this. Adrian watched that, not the words, the instinct. "You need to leave," he added, sharper now. "Whatever this is, you don't remember me, do you?" She didn't raise her voice, didn't interrupt him forcefully, but the question cut straight through everything he was about to say. Adrian frowned. "I've never seen you before." There was no hesitation in it, no uncertainty, just certainty built on a memory that felt solid to him. Nia didn't respond immediately. For the first time since he walked in, she really looked at him. Not his face, not his reaction, something deeper. Like she was searching for recognition that should have been there, and wasn't. "You're sure?" she asked quietly. That should have irritated him. It almost did. "I don't forget people," Adrian said. That was the truth, as far as he knew. He built his life on precision, details, control, names, faces, deals. He remembered everything that mattered, which meant, if he didn't remember her, she shouldn't matter. And yet, she was standing in his home, holding a child that looked entirely too real. Nia's grip tightened slightly around the baby, not enough to disturb him, but enough to ground herself. Then she nodded once, slow, measured, like she had just confirmed something she didn't want to be true. "Okay," she said. No argument, no attempt to convince him, just acceptance. And somehow, that unsettled him more than anything she could have said, because this wasn't a woman trying to prove a lie. This was someone adjusting to a reality she hadn't expected, and Adrian felt it, that first quiet shift. This situation wasn't just strange, something about it was wrong. Adrian took a step closer this time, slower, more careful, like distance might give him control again. "Who are you?" he asked. It sounded like a simple question. It wasn't, because now it carried something else under it. Doubt. Nia didn't answer immediately. She shifted the baby slightly in her arms, her hand resting against his back, until he settled completely. Only then did she look up at Adrian again. "You really don't remember anything," she said. Still not a question. Adrian's jaw tightened. "Stop saying that like it means something." Nia held his gaze for a long second. Then she moved. Not toward the door, not away from him. Toward the table beside the couch. She reached down and picked up a thin folder. Plain, unmarked, too ordinary for the weight it seemed to carry. From across the room, Adrian watched her like he was deciding whether to stop her or let this play out. Nia turned back and walked toward him, each step steady, no hesitation. When she stopped in front of him, she didn't explain it, didn't soften it. She simply held it out. "This is your missing time." The words didn't sound dramatic. That's what made them land harder. Adrian stared at the folder, then at her. "You expect me to believe I just forgot months of my life?" "I don't expect anything from you," Nia said calmly. A beat, then, "I expect you to read." For a second, he didn't move. Then, slowly, he took it. The weight of it felt wrong in his hand, too light for something that was supposed to mean nothing, too heavy for something he couldn't explain. He opened it. The first page, medical records, dates, signatures, a location he didn't recognize, but somehow felt familiar. Adrian's expression didn't break, but something behind his eyes did, because the dates didn't match his memory, didn't match anything he knew to be true, and for the first time since he walked through that door, he didn't have an answer. Have you ever stood in front of someone who knew your past, while your mind came up empty? Welcome to Mr. Gerald Family. If stories of forbidden choices and dangerous men push you to the edge, support the channel by subscribing. Help me reach 1,000 subscribers so I can bring you more stories that stay with you long after they end. Your support truly matters. Back in the room, Adrian looked up slowly. "This doesn't make sense." Nia didn't argue, didn't push. She just said, "I know." And somehow, that made it worse. Adrian didn't close the folder. He lowered it slowly, his eyes still locked on the page, like it might rearrange itself if he stared long enough. It didn't. The dates stayed wrong, the signatures stayed real, and the silence in the room, it shifted. "You broke into my home," he said finally, his voice quieter now but tighter. "You're standing here with a child you claim is mine, and you expect me to focus on paperwork?" Nia didn't respond immediately. She adjusted Micah slightly in her arms, resting his head against her shoulder as his small fingers curled into the fabric of her shirt. The movement was instinctive, unforced, and Adrian noticed that annoyed him more than it should have. "You're avoiding the point," he continued, stepping closer now. "I don't know you. That child is not a discussion you get to shut down." Her voice didn't rise, but it cut clean through his. That stopped him, not because of what she said, because of how easily she said it. Adrian's jaw tightened. "I get to shut down anything happening in my house." "No," Nia replied calmly. "You get to decide how you respond to it." That was different, subtle, but important, because she wasn't asking permission to stay. She was removing his authority to make her leave. Adrian let out a short breath, something close to a laugh, but without any humor behind it. "You're very comfortable for someone in your position." Nia met his gaze. "You're very certain for someone who's missing pieces of his own life." That landed harder than he expected. For a second, just a second, he didn't have a response. So he shifted. Physically, he moved past her, not rushing, not hesitating either. Straight toward the crib. Nia didn't step in his way, but her body changed, slightly, enough to make it clear. She was watching him now, in a different way. Adrian stopped beside the crib and looked down. The baby was awake again, quiet, eyes open, looking up without recognition, without expectation, just there. Adrian studied him, searching, not emotionally, structurally, features, details, anything that made this make sense. "This proves nothing," he said after a moment. Nia didn't move. "Then stop looking for proof," she said. That irritated him. "I'm not going to take your word for something like this. I didn't ask you to." That again. No pressure, no pleading, no attempt to convince him. Just statements. And somehow, that made everything harder. Adrian straightened slightly and turned back toward her. "Where's the test?" he asked. "DNA, documentation, anything that actually holds weight." Nia shook her head once. "Not yet." That answer came too fast, too certain. "Why not?" He pressed. Because that's not the first question that matters. It's the only question that matters. No, she said, and this time, there was something sharper in it. It's the easiest one. That shifted something. Because now, this wasn't about proving the child existed. This was about something else. Something she wasn't saying. Adrian took another step toward her. You don't walk into my life, make a claim like that, and start setting the rules. Nia didn't step back, didn't even blink. I didn't walk into your life, she said. A pause. Then, I was already in it. That line stayed between them. Unresolved, uncomfortable. Adrian's hand moved slightly toward his pocket. Phone, instinct, control. Nia saw it. Of course she did. If you're going to call security, she said, calm as ever, do it. No fear, no urgency, just permission. That wasn't what he expected. You think I won't? He asked. I think if you were going to, she said, you would have already done it. That hit something precise. Because she was right. He had already had the time, already had the reason, and yet, he hadn't. Adrian's hand stayed where it was for a second longer. Then slowly, he lowered it. Not consciously, not as a decision, as a reaction he didn't fully understand. And that irritated him more than anything else so far. Nia watched it happen. Didn't comment, didn't acknowledge it, but something in her expression shifted. Not victory, recognition. The baby made a small sound again, shifting slightly in her arms. Adrian glanced at him, then back at her, then at the folder still in his hand. Everything in the room felt like it was asking a question he didn't have the answer to, and for the first time in a long time, that wasn't acceptable. The silence didn't settle. It stretched. Thinner now, tighter, like something in the room had shifted, and neither of them was willing to name it first. Adrian moved away from the crib, slower this time, like proximity to the child had done something he didn't want to examine too closely. He stopped near the center of the room again, reclaiming space, or trying to. You're staying very calm for someone making a claim like this, he said. Nia adjusted Micah gently, her hand resting against his back as his breathing evened out again. I'm not making a claim, she replied. That made him look at her, directly. Then what would you call it? Nia met his gaze without hesitation. A situation you haven't caught up to yet. That was deliberate. And it landed exactly where she intended. Adrian let out a breath through his nose, controlled, but the edge was there now. You don't get to speak in riddles, he said. Not here. I'm not, she answered. You just don't like the answers. That was enough. Adrian closed the distance between them again, this time faster, not aggressive, but no longer patient. Let's make this simple, he said. You're in my home. You're holding a child you say is mine. You're telling me I forgot you, so start explaining. Clearly, Nia didn't step back, didn't flinch, but her grip on Micah shifted slightly. Protective, measured. You want clarity? She said. Yes. Then listen without trying to control what you hear. That almost made him laugh again. Almost. You don't give instructions in my space. Nia's eyes didn't move. You keep saying that like it changes anything. That was the second time she had done that. Taken his authority and set it aside without effort. And now, it was starting to get under his skin. Adrian turned away from her abruptly, pacing once across the room, not aimless, measured, contained, like he was organizing something in his head that refused to settle into place. This doesn't work, he said, more to himself than to her. None of this works. Nia didn't interrupt, didn't fill the space. She let him think that was intentional, because the more he tried to force logic onto the situation, the more it pushed back. Adrian stopped near the window, the city stretching endlessly below him. Everything out there made sense. Systems, patterns, results. This didn't. You said I was already part of this, he said without turning. Explain that. Nia took a few steps forward, not closing the distance fully, just enough to keep the conversation grounded. You came into the hospital, she said. Adrian turned slightly at that. Not fully, but enough. When? He asked. Nia didn't hesitate. The night my sister died. That changed the air again, subtly, but completely. Adrian's brow tightened. I don't remember that. I know. Her answer came too easily. Too steady. Adrian turned fully now. That's not an answer. It's the truth. There it was again. That same pattern. He pushed. She didn't resist. She just stayed where she was. And somehow, that forced him to move instead. What hospital? He asked. Nia shook her head once. Not yet. That snapped something. Stop doing that, Adrian said sharply. Stop deciding what I get to know. Nia didn't react to the tone. Didn't match it. She simply looked at him. You're asking for answers, she said. But you haven't proven you can handle them. That landed hard, because it wasn't emotional. It was evaluative. Like she was assessing him, and that was new. Adrian took a step closer again. You don't know anything about what I can handle. Nia held his gaze. I know what you already chose once. That stopped him. Completely. Not physically, but mentally, because that line didn't come from assumption. It came from knowledge. What does that mean? He asked. Nia didn't answer immediately, and for the first time, there was a flicker of something behind her composure. Not weakness, but weight. You saw what happened, she said quietly, and you made a decision. Adrian's jaw tightened. What decision? Nia's eyes didn't leave his. That it wasn't worth exposing. That hit deeper than anything else so far. Because now, this wasn't just about missing memory. This was about action. Choice. Responsibility. Adrian shook his head once. That doesn't make sense. It didn't to me either, Nia replied. That line carried something different. Not confrontation, not control. Something closer to truth, without protection. The baby shifted again in her arms, letting out a soft, restless sound. Nia adjusted him automatically, her hand moving in a slow, grounding rhythm. Adrian watched that again. That consistency, that certainty. It didn't match the chaos of everything else. And that contrast was starting to matter. You're telling me, he said slowly, that I was there. I saw something serious enough to matter, and I chose to ignore it. I'm telling you, Nia said, that you didn't ignore it. A pause. Then, you buried it. The word stayed in the space between them. Heavy, uncomfortable, final. Adrian didn't respond immediately, because now, his mind wasn't rejecting it outright. It was hesitating, and that hesitation was new. The word didn't leave the room. It stayed there, buried. Adrian turned away from her again, slower this time, like movement itself required more thought than it should. That's a serious accusation, he said. It wasn't loud, but it carried weight. Nia didn't soften. It's not an accusation, she replied. It's what happened. Adrian ran a hand across his jaw, his mind moving fast now. Too fast. Because this wasn't just about a stranger anymore. This was about a version of himself he didn't recognize. And that was a problem. No, he said, firmer now. We're not doing this without facts. He turned back to her. Enough of the controlled answers. Enough of the selective details. He stepped closer again. This time, there was no hesitation in it. If that child is mine, then we prove it. Today, there it was. Control. Structure. Something solid to hold on to. DNA test, Adrian continued. Lab verification. No delays. Nia listened, didn't interrupt, didn't argue immediately, and that alone told him. She had already expected this. Say the word, he added. We settle that first, and then we deal with whatever story you're trying to build around it. That last line carried edge, deliberate, because now he was pushing back, trying to regain ground. Nia shifted Micah slightly in her arms, her hand resting gently against his back as his small fingers tightened briefly against her shirt. She looked down at him for a moment, not to avoid Adrian, to center herself. Then she looked back up. No. The answer came calm, immediate, unmoved. Adrian blinked once, not because he didn't hear it, because he didn't expect it. No? He repeated. No, Nia said again. That wasn't hesitation. That was refusal. Adrian let out a short breath, tension building now in a way he couldn't contain as easily. That's not how this works. That's exactly how this works, she replied. He shook his head. You don't make a claim like that, and then block the only way to verify it. I'm not blocking anything, Nia said. I'm prioritizing. That word hit wrong. Prioritizing what? Adrian asked, sharper now. Nia held his gaze. Whether you should be near him at all. That stopped him, not because of the statement itself, because of the assumption behind it. You don't get to make that call, he said. Nia didn't raise her voice, didn't shift her stance, but something in her presence changed. You're right, she said, a beat. Then, but I already did. That landed harder than anything else, because there was no aggression in it, no emotion, just fact. Adrian took a step closer, closing the space between them completely now. You don't know me, he said. Nia didn't move. Yes, she replied quietly. I do. That was the line that cracked something, because it wasn't defensive, it wasn't emotional, it was certain. And Adrian, for the first time, wasn't. You don't remember the hospital, she continued. You don't remember the reports. You don't remember the decision you made after you saw everything. Her voice stayed steady. But now, there was something underneath it. Not anger, not pain, something heavier. You don't remember walking away, she said. The words hit deeper than they should have, because they didn't sound like something she was inventing. They sounded like something she had already lived through. Adrian exhaled slowly, his control slipping, not outwardly, but internally. You keep talking about decisions, he said, about actions I don't remember taking. Exactly. That one word cut clean. Which means, Adrian continued, forcing logic back into the situation, either you're wrong, he stepped even closer, or someone is manipulating this. Nia didn't react the way he expected, didn't defend herself, didn't argue. She simply reached past him, toward the table. Adrian turned slightly, watching her now with sharper focus. She picked up the folder again, the same one he had already opened. But this time, she held it differently, not offering it, not presenting it, holding it like something final. You keep asking for proof, she said. Adrian didn't respond, because now, he was watching more carefully. Here it is, she added. Then she stepped forward, close enough that there was no distance left between them, and placed the folder back into his hand, not gently, not forcefully, deliberately. This isn't about whether he's your son, she said, her voice lowered slightly, focused. It's about whether you're safe enough to be his father. That word again, safe. It stayed in the air longer than anything else. Adrian's grip tightened slightly around the folder, because now, the ground he had been standing on wasn't just unstable, it was shifting under him. You don't get to decide that, he said, but this time, it didn't sound as certain. Nia held his gaze. No, she replied. A pause. Then, your choices already did. That was it. The first real break, not loud, not dramatic, but undeniable. Because Adrian didn't have an immediate answer, didn't have a counter, didn't have control, just questions, and the unsettling realization that for the first time in years, he might not be the one who understands what's happening. Micah stirred again between them, a small movement, a soft sound, and for a brief moment, everything else paused. Adrian's eyes dropped, just for a second, to the child, then back to Nia, then to the folder in his hand, and something inside him shifted. Not belief, not acceptance, but doubt. What if? He said slowly, almost to himself, then stopped, because finishing that thought meant letting it exist. Nia didn't help him, didn't complete it. She just watched, waiting. Adrian looked down at the folder again, at the pages inside, at the version of himself that existed somewhere, but not in his memory. Then he asked the question that changed everything. Quiet, controlled, but no longer certain. What if my memory is the lie? Adrian didn't look at Nia again, not immediately, because if he did, he might start reacting to her instead of what was in his hands, and right now, that felt dangerous. The folder stayed open, The pages slightly bent where his grip tightened without him noticing. He moved away from her, not far, just enough to create space between himself and everything that didn't make sense. The city stretched behind the glass, steady and familiar. He needed that. Something that didn't shift. Something that didn't question him back. Slowly, he looked down again. The first page was already open. Medical records. Clean, structured, official. His eyes moved across the details again, slower this time. Patient logs, admission timestamps, physician notes. Nothing unusual. Until the date hit him again. He froze, not physically, internally, because his mind did something strange. It didn't reject the date. It hesitated around it. That wasn't normal. Adrian narrowed his eyes slightly, reading the line again. Then again, same result. The date didn't change, but his certainty about where he had been that day shifted. That's not right, he said quietly. Not to Nia. To himself, he turned the page. Neurological assessment. Short-term memory disruption noted. Observation period recommended. Restricted disclosure. That line again. Restricted. By who? Adrian's jaw tightened. That doesn't mean anything, he said, louder now. Nia didn't interrupt, didn't move closer. She stayed exactly where she was, letting him process. Adrian flipped to the next page faster this time. More reports, more notes. Consistent formatting. Consistent signatures. Nothing sloppy, nothing that looked fabricated. That was the problem. If this was fake, it was done too well. His eyes stopped on a section halfway down the page. Loss of temporal continuity. He read it once, then again, and something about that phrase didn't sit right, because it didn't sound like something written for explanation. It sounded like something written to label a problem. Without solving it, Adrian exhaled slowly. This could be altered, he said. That sounded better. Safer. Nia nodded once. It could. That answer didn't help. Adrian looked up at her sharply. You're not even going to argue that? I don't need to, she replied. That irritated him again. You're making a serious claim, he said. At least defend it. I'm not trying to convince you, Nia said. That line again. Consistent. Unmoving. Adrian shook his head slightly, pacing once toward the window and back. No, he said. That's not how this works. Nia didn't respond, and the silence pushed him further. You don't drop something like this into my life, and then stand there like it's my job to figure it out, he continued. Still nothing from her. That's when it snapped. Not loud, but sharp. Stop speaking in pieces, Adrian said suddenly, the frustration finally breaking through. If there's something I'm missing, then say it clearly. The room held that moment. Tight. Focused. Micah shifted slightly at the change in tone, letting out a small restless sound. Nia adjusted him instinctively, her hand steady against his back. Then she looked at Adrian, and for the first time, her calm carried weight. Because the full truth changes everything, she said. No hesitation, no softening, just fact. Adrian held her gaze, and something about the way she said that made him pause, not because he agreed, because a part of him believed she meant it. He looked back down at the file, slower now, more careful, not trying to disprove it anymore, trying to understand how it could exist at all. Another page, another note. Medication administered. Observation period extended. No external contact authorized. Adrian frowned. No external contact? He repeated. That's what it says, Nia replied. That's not protocol, he said immediately. No, she agreed. Again, no resistance, no argument, just alignment with the truth. And that was starting to matter. Adrian flipped back to the first page, then forward again, then back. Like repetition might expose a flaw, but the pages didn't change. The structure held, the details aligned, and the more he looked, the less confident he felt about what he remembered. He stopped moving, the file still open in his hands. You're telling me, he said slowly, that I was here. Not a question. A test. Nia answered it anyway. Yes. Adrian swallowed slightly. And I don't remember any of it. No. That word landed differently now, because it didn't feel like resistance anymore. It felt like confirmation. Adrian looked down at the page again, then back at her, then at the baby, and something unfamiliar settled in his chest. Not panic, not yet, but something close to it, because for the first time, his memory didn't feel solid. It felt incomplete. Adrian didn't close the folder, but he stopped turning the pages, because something had shifted, not in the documents but in him. He walked past Nia without a word and set the folder down on the edge of the table, like putting distance between himself and it might restore some clarity. It didn't. He leaned forward slightly, palms resting against the surface, head lowered for just a second, thinking, rebuilding, reasserting control, or trying to, "This doesn't happen," he said quietly. Nia didn't respond. He straightened and turned toward her again. People don't just lose time like this. Not months. Not without knowing. They do, she said. Simple, direct. And again. No effort to convince him. Adrian shook his head. No, that kind of disruption. He paused, searching for something that made sense. There would be signs, gaps, something I could trace. Nia adjusted Micah slightly, his small hand now resting against her collarbone as he watched the room with quiet curiosity. There were signs, she said. Adrian frowned. Where? Nia met his eyes. In how quickly you moved on. That landed in a way he didn't expect. Not because of the words, but because of what they suggested. What does that mean? He asked. Nia hesitated, just for a second, and that hesitation, that was new. You didn't ask questions, she said. Not after you left. Adrian's expression tightened. Left where? Nia held his gaze. The hospital. That word again, and now, it carried more weight. Adrian walked back to the table, picked up the folder again, flipping through it faster this time, more aggressively, like speed might expose something logic couldn't. There's no discharge summary, he said suddenly. Nia nodded slightly. I know. That doesn't make sense, Adrian continued. There's admission, observation, notes, but no release documentation. Exactly. That word echoed, because it didn't argue. It confirmed. Adrian looked up at her sharply. You're saying I was there, under medical supervision, and then what? I just walked out? No, Nia said, and that one word shifted everything again. Adrian stilled. What do you mean, no? Nia didn't answer immediately. She looked down at Micah, adjusting his blanket gently, her hand lingering there a second longer than necessary, grounding herself, choosing what to say and what not to. Adrian saw that, and it pushed him further. Stop filtering this, he said, sharper now. If you know something, say it. Nia looked back at him. You didn't leave on your own. The room went quiet. Completely. Adrian didn't move, didn't blink, because that line, that wasn't vague, that wasn't controlled, that was direct. What does that mean? He asked, voice lower now. Nia held his gaze. It means your exit wasn't your decision. Adrian's mind pushed back immediately. That's not possible. It is. I would know. No, she said. A beat. Then, you wouldn't. That hit harder than anything else she had said so far. Because now, this wasn't about memory gaps. This was about control being taken away. Adrian stepped closer again. Not aggressive, but focused. Who made that decision? He asked. Nia didn't answer. And that broke whatever restraint he had left. Stop doing that. Adrian snapped, the frustration cutting through fully now. Stop giving me half of it like I'm supposed to fill in the rest. Micah stirred at the sharpness in his voice, letting out a soft cry. Nia immediately shifted him, her hand moving gently, steady, calming him before the sound could build into something louder. Then she looked back at Adrian, and this time, there was something different in her eyes. Not distance, not control, something closer to warning, because the full truth changes everything, she said again. But now, it didn't sound like a statement. It sounded like a line he wasn't ready to cross. Adrian exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair, pacing once across the room again. This doesn't make sense, he muttered. None of this lines up. Nia didn't interrupt. She let him work through it. Because this part, he had to reach himself. Adrian stopped near the window again, looking out but not seeing anything. If I was there, he said slowly. If I was under observation, and I didn't leave on my own. He turned back toward her. Then someone signed me out. Nia didn't move, didn't speak, but her silence confirmed it. Adrian's chest tightened slightly. Not enough to show, but enough to feel. And I don't remember any of it, he added. No, she said, that word again. But now, it wasn't just unsettling. It was starting to feel dangerous. Adrian looked down at the folder again, then back at her, then at Micah, and something connected. Not fully, but enough. You knew, he said. Nia didn't respond immediately. You knew something was wrong, he continued. That's why you didn't come to me. Nia held his gaze. Yes, no hesitation, no defense, just truth. Adrian let out a slow breath, and instead of telling me everything, he stepped closer again. You decided to test me. That word sat between them. Nia didn't deny it. I decided to protect him, she said. Her voice didn't rise, didn't harden, but it didn't bend either. Adrian looked at the baby again, then back at her, and for the first time, his frustration didn't come from her. It came from himself. Because now, this wasn't just about what he didn't know. It was about what someone else had made sure he wouldn't know. The room felt different now. Not louder, not quieter, just tighter. Like every answer Adrian pulled closer, only made the space around him narrower. He didn't move right away, didn't speak either, because something had started forming in his mind, and for once, he wasn't rushing to shut it down. He looked at the folder again, then closed it, not out of rejection, out of control. If he kept reading blindly, he would react, and reacting meant losing ground. He wasn't ready for that, not yet. You knew this before I walked in, he said finally. His voice had changed, lower, more focused. Nia didn't answer immediately. She shifted Micah slightly as he settled against her shoulder, his breathing calm again, unaware of the weight sitting between the two adults in the room. Then she looked at Adrian. Yes. That one word didn't shake, didn't hesitate, and for the first time, Adrian didn't push back against it. He absorbed it. You knew I wouldn't remember, he added. Nia held his gaze. I suspected. That was different. Careful. Measured. Adrian nodded slowly. Based on what? Nia exhaled once. Not tired. Not overwhelmed. Just choosing. Because of how it ended, she said. Adrian's eyes sharpened. How what ended? Nia didn't answer directly. Instead, she took a step closer. Not enough to close the distance fully, but enough to make the space between them intentional again. You weren't supposed to come back into this, she said. That landed quietly. But it hit deeper than anything else. Adrian's brow tightened. What does that mean? Nia didn't break eye contact. It means, she said slowly, the version of you that saw everything wasn't meant to exist long enough to matter. Silence followed, heavy, uncomfortable. Adrian didn't speak. Because now, this wasn't about confusion. This was about intent. Say that again, he said. Nia didn't repeat it. She clarified it. Whatever happened in that hospital, she said, whatever you found, it didn't fit into the version of your world that needed to continue. Adrian shook his head once. That doesn't explain memory loss. No, Nia agreed. It explains why it stayed gone. That was it. That was the shift. Because now, the missing time wasn't random. It wasn't accidental. It wasn't something that just happened. It was something that was allowed, maybe even enforced. Adrian felt it then. Not fear, not panic, something colder. Because this kind of problem didn't come from nowhere. It came from systems, from decisions, from people who benefited from things staying exactly the way they were. He stepped back slightly, not retreating, recalculating. You're saying someone made sure I wouldn't remember, he said. Nia didn't soften it. Yes. No hesitation, no qualification, just truth. Adrian let out a slow breath, his mind moving differently now. Not rejecting, not arguing, building. If that's true, he said, more to himself than to her, then this isn't about one incident. Nia didn't respond, because she knew he was starting to see it. This is bigger, Adrian continued. A system, a structure, something that required. He stopped, because the next thought, the one forming just beneath that, was harder to say. Nia didn't help him, didn't interrupt. She let him get there on his own. Adrian looked up at her again. And I was part of it, he said. It wasn't a question. It didn't need to be. Nia held his gaze. Yes, that word didn't hit the same way it had before. It didn't feel like resistance anymore. It felt like confirmation of something he was already starting to accept. Adrian nodded once, slow, measured, then he looked away, toward the glass, toward the city. But this time, it didn't feel stable. It didn't feel controlled. It felt distant, like something he used to understand. You said, I made a decision, he said. Nia didn't move. Yes. Adrian's jaw tightened slightly. And you haven't told me what that decision was. Nia's grip on Micah shifted again. Subtle, but there. You already know, she said. Adrian looked back at her. No, he replied. I don't. Nia held his gaze. And for the first time, there was no space left between truth and delivery. You chose to protect it, she said. The room didn't react. But Adrian did. Not outwardly, internally. Because now, the pieces weren't scattered anymore. They were starting to connect. Not fully, but enough. He looked down at the folder in his hand, at the records, at the gaps, at the version of himself that existed somewhere in all of it, but didn't exist in his mind. And something settled into place. Not comfort, not clarity, something heavier, something that didn't move easily. They didn't just hide this from me, Adrian said slowly. Nia didn't interrupt. They made sure I wouldn't look for it, he added. That was the realization. Not loud, not dramatic, but final, because now, this wasn't about missing information. It was about control over what he was allowed to remember. Adrian looked up again, and this time, there was no denial left in his eyes, just something sharper, more dangerous. Who benefits from that? He asked. Nia didn't answer. She didn't need to, because he already knew the answer wasn't simple, and it wasn't small. Adrian exhaled slowly, then nodded once, to himself, not to her, because now, he wasn't reacting to her anymore. He was thinking beyond her, beyond the room, beyond the moment, and that was where the real problem started. By morning, the penthouse didn't feel like his. Nothing had moved. Nothing was out of place. And yet, everything felt altered. Adrian stood near the glass, looking out at the city that used to feel like an extension of his decisions. Today, it felt separate, like it was operating on rules he hadn't approved. Behind him, the quiet rhythm of movement continued. Nia didn't ask where he was going, didn't ask what he planned to do next. She didn't need to, because this part had nothing to do with her. Adrian picked up his jacket from the back of the chair, paused, then looked toward the nursery. The door was slightly open, just enough to hear soft movement inside. Micah. For a moment, Adrian stood still, not moving toward it, not walking away either. Then he turned and left. The car ride was quiet, not because there was nothing to say, because there was too much. Adrian sat in the back seat, his gaze forward but unfocused. The city moved past him in clean lines and familiar routes. Everything outside behaved exactly the way it was supposed to, predictable, structured, reliable, which only made the problem sharper, because his mind wasn't. He replayed the file, the gaps, the missing discharge, the controlled silence, and one thought kept returning, not loud but persistent. If something was hidden from him, then it wasn't random, it was intentional. The building rose ahead, like it always had. Glass, steel, precision, Wolf Enterprises, a structure built on decisions that didn't leave room for uncertainty. Adrian stepped out of the car without waiting for the door to be opened. That alone was different. Inside, nothing had changed. Staff moved with efficiency. Voices stayed measured. Everything aligned with expectation, and yet, Adrian felt it immediately. A slight delay in reactions, a fraction too much awareness in the way people looked at him, not obvious, but present. He walked through it without slowing, without acknowledging it, because drawing attention to it would confirm it. Welcome back. The voice came from his right. Familiar, controlled. Adrian turned. Lila Van stood there, tablet in hand, posture exactly as it should be. Nothing about her had changed. Which meant, if something was off, it would be subtle. You're ahead of schedule, she added. Adrian studied her for a second longer than usual. Am the first? Lila didn't hesitate. Yes. A clean answer. No adjustment. No correction. Adrian nodded once. Bring me up to speed. They walked toward the elevators together, side by side, measured pace. Operations continued without interruption. Lila said, medical division expansion completed. Regulatory review cleared. There it was, medical division. Adrian didn't react outwardly, but his focus sharpened. Any internal incidents? He asked. Lila's tone didn't change. Nothing outside standard thresholds. That phrase again, controlled language, designed to minimize. Adrian pressed the elevator button, waited. Then, 8 months ago, he said, there was a case. Lila didn't look at him immediately. Which case? Adrian turned slightly. Private hospital. Fatality. Internal audit. A brief pause. Small, but real. I'll need specifics, she said. Adrian watched her, carefully. You don't have them? Lila met his gaze now. I don't operate on incomplete information. That was her style. Precise, controlled, but now it felt like deflection. The elevator doors opened. They stepped inside. Silence followed. Then Adrian spoke again. You removed my secondary archive system. It wasn't a question. Lila didn't respond immediately. Then, yes. The elevator continued rising, but the conversation had stopped moving. Why? Adrian asked. Lila adjusted her grip on the tablet. You authorized it. That landed. Not loudly, but completely. Adrian didn't blink. When? 3 days after your return from Zurich. There it was again, that version of events, that timeline that didn't match his memory. Adrian turned slightly toward her. Walk me through it. Lila didn't hesitate. You came in early, canceled all external meetings, requested isolation. Her voice remained steady, neutral. You reviewed internal systems personally. Adrian's jaw shifted slightly, and Lila held his gaze. You said redundancy creates risk. That didn't sound like him. Not the version of him he knew. Then you ordered removal, she added. Adrian looked away briefly, thinking, because that wasn't just a missing memory. That was a decision, a deliberate one. What else? He asked. Lila paused, just long enough to matter. You were different. That word again. And now, it carried weight. Adrian looked back at her. How? Lila's expression didn't change, but her answer did. Detached. The elevator stopped. The doors opened, but neither of them moved immediately, because that word had already done its damage. Adrian stepped out of the elevator first, not rushed, not delayed, but with purpose. Lila followed half a step behind. Her pace aligned with his like it always had been. That detail hadn't changed. It was small, but Adrian noticed it now, because now he was paying attention to everything. Inside his office, nothing looked different. Desk aligned, screens inactive, files exactly where they should be. It was the kind of order he had built his life around, which meant, if something had been removed, it had been done carefully, deliberately. Adrian walked straight to his desk and set his hand on the surface, steadying himself for a second without making it obvious. Then he opened the first drawer, paused, closed it, moved to the next. Same result. Everything looked right. But something felt missing. You're looking for something specific, Lila said from behind him. Not a question, an observation. Adrian didn't turn. Yes. What is it? He opened another drawer. Slower this time. There was a secondary archive system, he said. Offline. Isolated. Lila didn't respond immediately. That silence meant something. Adrian closed the drawer and turned to face her. That system should still exist, he said. Lila met his gaze. It doesn't. That answer came clean. Too clean. Explain. Lila shifted her weight slightly, tablet still in her hand. You ordered it removed. Adrian stepped closer. Not aggressive, but direct. Removed how? Completely. That word didn't leave room for interpretation. No backups? Adrian asked. No. No mirrored storage? No. Adrian studied her, longer this time, because that wasn't just unusual. That was against everything he stood for. I don't eliminate redundancy, he said. Lila didn't argue. You did. The room felt smaller now. Not physically, but mentally, because now, this wasn't just about missing memory. It was about behavior that didn't match who he believed he was. What justification did I give? Adrian asked. Lila didn't answer right away. And that was new. Lila. Her name came out steady, but there was pressure behind it now. She met his eyes. You said the system was compromised. Adrian frowned. Compromised how? You didn't specify. That didn't make sense. I always specify, he said. Lila didn't respond, because she knew. He was right. Adrian turned away, pacing once toward the window, then back again. If a system is compromised, he said, you isolate the breach. You don't erase the entire structure. That wasn't your decision at the time, Lila replied. That stopped him. What does that mean? Lila held his gaze. You weren't operating the way you normally do. There it was again. Not accusation, not assumption. Pattern. Adrian stepped closer again. You're choosing your words carefully. Yes. At whose benefit? Lila didn't hesitate. Yours. That answer should have reassured him. It didn't. Then stop, Adrian said. Lila blinked once. Stop what? Stop protecting the version of me you think needs protecting. That landed, because now, he wasn't asking for information. He was removing the filter. Lila's posture shifted slightly. Not weaker, more precise. You came in that morning, she said, and you didn't want questions. Adrian didn't interrupt. You restricted access to your office, she continued. You reviewed internal reports personally. You removed the backup system. A pause, then, and you said the less record that existed, the safer the company would be. Silence. Adrian didn't move. Because that sentence felt like something he would say, not the version of him standing here, but a version of him, focused only on outcome, not consequence. What reports? He asked. Lila hesitated. Small, but enough. Medical division, she said. There it was again. The same thread. Adrian nodded slowly. And those reports are gone. Yes, because I ordered them erased. Yes, no hesitation anymore. That was important. Because now, Lila wasn't deflecting, she was confirming. Adrian turned slightly, his mind moving faster now, but more controlled than before. And no one questioned that? He asked. Lila's answer came steady. You don't build systems that question you. That line hit harder than anything else. Because it wasn't criticism, it was fact. Adrian exhaled slowly, then looked around his office again. Everything in place, everything controlled, everything. Exactly how he designed it. And suddenly, that felt like a problem. Show me what's left, he said. Lila didn't move. There isn't anything left. Adrian looked at her sharply. That's not possible. It is, she said. You made sure of it. The room went quiet again, but this time, it wasn't tension. It was realization building, because now, this wasn't about someone hiding something from him. This was about him, removing it himself, and not remembering why. Adrian walked back to the desk and placed both hands on it again, leaning slightly forward, grounding himself, because this was different. You're telling me I erased my own safety net, he said. Yes. And removed every trace of something important. Yes. Adrian nodded once, then again, slow, measured. Because now, the question wasn't just what happened. It was, why did he decide it shouldn't exist? And that answer wasn't in the room. Adrian didn't move from the desk. His hand stayed planted against the surface, fingers slightly spread like he needed something solid to anchor himself to, because now, this wasn't just about missing information. This was about intention. And intention always had a reason. You said I reviewed the reports personally, he said. Lila stood across from him, still composed, still measured. Yes. Adrian lifted his head slowly. Then, I saw everything. Not a question, a conclusion. Lila didn't hesitate. Yes. That answer settled heavily, because it removed doubt. There was no more. Maybe, possibly unclear he had seen it. Fully, clearly, and still, something went wrong. What was in those reports? Adrian asked. Lila's grip on the tablet tightened slightly, not enough to be obvious, but enough. You already know the division, she said. That's not what I asked. A beat, then, patient fatality rates exceeded internal projections. Corporate language. Controlled, clean. Adrian didn't react. Say it without filtering, he said. Lila held his gaze. The system failed. That was better, more accurate, but still not enough. How many? Adrian asked. Lila paused. Not long, but enough to matter. More than acceptable. Adrian's expression hardened slightly. That's not a number. No, she said. It's a threshold. That answer did something, because it revealed the real problem. Not just failure, but how failure was measured. And I saw that. Adrian said, yes, and I chose not to expose it. Yes, there it was. Clear, direct. Final. Adrian stepped back from the desk slowly, not because he was overwhelmed, because he was thinking, and thinking required distance. Walk me through the decision, he said. Lila didn't hesitate this time. You reviewed the full report, she said. You identified systemic risk, staffing reductions, delayed responses, medication adjustments. Each word added weight. You calculated the impact of exposure, she continued. Legal consequences, financial collapse, loss of control across multiple divisions. Adrian didn't interrupt, because this sounded like him, not the version standing here, but the version that made decisions without hesitation. And then, he asked. Lila met his eyes. You decided containment was the better option. That word again. Contained, not fixed, not resolved. Contained. What does containment mean? Adrian asked. Lila answered without pause. You ordered the internal audit erased. The room didn't react. But Adrian did, internally, because that wasn't hesitation, that wasn't delay, that was action. And the external exposure? He asked. Prevented. How? Legal suppression, internal restructuring, personnel adjustments. Clean, efficient, cold. Adrian turned slightly, walking toward the window again, but this time, he didn't look out. He looked at his reflection in the glass, and for the first time, it didn't feel like him. So I saw a system failing, he said slowly. Yes. And I chose to protect the system. Yes. Not protect the people. Not correct the damage. Protect the system. Adrian let out a slow breath, because now, there was no distance left, no version of events where he wasn't involved, no angle where he was just a victim of missing memory. He wasn't just affected by this, he created the outcome. You said I was different, Adrian said, still looking at the glass. Yes. Lila's voice remained steady behind him. How different? There was a pause this time, longer, because this answer mattered more. You weren't questioning anything, she said. Adrian turned slightly. Explain. Lila met his gaze. You weren't weighing options, she said. You weren't analyzing risk from multiple angles. A beat, then. You had already decided. That landed deeper than everything else, because it meant. He didn't struggle with it. He didn't hesitate. He didn't question the cost. He saw the problem and chose the outcome. Immediately, like it didn't matter, Adrian said quietly. Lila didn't correct him. No, she replied. Like the outcome mattered more than the cost. That was worse, because it sounded justified, logical, efficient, and completely detached. Adrian nodded slowly, because now he understood something he hadn't before. This wasn't about being manipulated. Not entirely. This wasn't about someone forcing his hand. This was about a version of him, making a decision he was fully capable of making, and then removing the evidence of it. Who suggested the deletion? Adrian asked. Lila didn't hesitate. You did. No hesitation. No ambiguity. Just truth. Adrian looked down briefly, then back at her, and no one stopped me. It wasn't a question. Lila's answer came clean. You built a system where no one could. That was it. That was the point. Everything locked into place. Because now, the problem wasn't just what happened. It was how easily it happened, and how efficiently it was erased. Adrian exhaled slowly, then nodded once, not in agreement, in acknowledgement, because now, there was no version of this story where he wasn't central, no version where he was just trying to uncover the truth. He was part of the reason it was hidden, and that realization didn't feel dramatic. It felt precise, like a calculation reaching its final number. Adrian stepped away from the window, back toward the desk, back into the space he controlled. But something about it felt different now, not weaker, not unstable, just exposed. He looked at Lila, then at the empty space where the backup system used to exist, then back at her again. And you let it happen, he said. Lila didn't react emotionally. I followed your directive. That answer was expected. But now, it wasn't enough. Adrian held her gaze. And if I told you to restore it? Lila didn't answer immediately. For the first time, there was hesitation, real hesitation, not controlled, not calculated. Human. That would require reconstructing data that no longer exists, she said. Adrian didn't look away. Try. Lila studied him carefully now, not as a superior, not as a system, as a variable that had changed. That would expose everything, she said. Adrian nodded. I know. A pause. Then, it should. That was the shift. Not loud, not dramatic, but irreversible. Because now, he wasn't protecting the system anymore. He was questioning it. And questioning it meant breaking it. Lila didn't respond right away. Because this wasn't the version of Adrian Wolf she had been managing. This was something else, something less predictable, more dangerous. Adrian turned away from her, but not back to the window, back to the desk, back to the space where decisions were made. And this time, he wasn't thinking about control. He was thinking about consequence. The hospital didn't feel urgent. That was the first thing Nia noticed. Not chaos, not panic, just movement that looked routine, even when it shouldn't have been. She stood in the hallway outside the private wing, arms folded tight against herself, her back straight like posture alone could hold everything in place. Her eyes stayed fixed on the door at the end of the corridor, closed, unmoving, too quiet. Someone walked past her, didn't stop, didn't ask if she needed anything, didn't even look long enough to register that she had been standing there for hours. That told her everything. This wasn't a place where people were seen. This was a place where things were processed, managed, contained. Nia pushed off the wall and walked toward the door again. Her steps were steady, but not calm. There was a difference. She reached for the handle, and it opened before she touched it. A nurse stepped out, nearly colliding with her. Oh, sorry, the nurse said quickly, adjusting her grip on a chart. Nia didn't move. How is she? She asked. The nurse hesitated. Not long, but enough. She's stable, she said. Too fast. Too automatic. Nia's eyes narrowed slightly. Stable how? The nurse shifted. Her vitals are being monitored. That wasn't an answer. That's not what I asked, Nia said. The nurse's expression tightened, just a fraction. I'm not authorized to. Then find someone who is. Nia didn't raise her voice. Didn't need to, because something in the way she stood made it clear she wasn't going anywhere. The nurse gave a small nod. I'll get someone, and walked away. Nia stepped into the room. The first thing she noticed was the silence. Not peaceful, not calm, just empty. Machines were running, screens were active, but the room felt like it had already been left behind. Her sister lay in the bed, motionless, her skin pale against the white sheets. Too still, too distant. Nia moved closer, slowly, like rushing would break something. She said it was routine, Nia whispered, more to herself than anyone else. She said it wasn't serious. No response, just the soft rhythm of machines doing their job, or pretending to. Nia reached for her sister's hand, cold, not freezing, but not right either. Her grip tightened slightly. "You're supposed to be fine," she said quietly. The words didn't carry emotion the way they should have, because emotion hadn't caught up yet. This wasn't grief. This was disbelief trying to hold its shape. The door opened behind her. Footsteps, measured, controlled. Nia didn't turn immediately, because she already knew, whoever it was, wouldn't give her what she needed. "Miss Carter." The voice was calm, professional, detached. Nia turned slowly. A doctor stood near the doorway, posture straight, expression carefully neutral. "She experienced a complication," he said. Nia stared at him. A complication, not a question, a repeat, because saying it out loud made it sound smaller than it felt. "Yes," he replied. "What kind of complication?" she asked. The doctor hesitated, and that hesitation told her more than the answer would. "We're still reviewing the case," he said. Nia took a step toward him. "Review it faster." The doctor didn't move. "We're doing everything we can." "No," Nia said. Her voice didn't rise, but it changed. Sharp now, precise. "You did everything you were supposed to." "That's not the same thing." That landed, because it wasn't emotional. It was accurate. The doctor's expression tightened slightly. "We followed protocol." Nia held his gaze. "That's not what I asked." Silence. Then, "She was given the prescribed dosage," he said. "By who?" Nia asked. "That's part of the review." "Then start talking." The doctor didn't answer, because now, this wasn't a conversation he could control. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Nia didn't track it. Time didn't behave normally in places like this. It stretched, collapsed, lost meaning. All that mattered was that nothing changed. No improvement, no clarity, no answers. Just updates that said nothing. By the time the hallway emptied, Nia was still there, sitting now, leaning forward, elbows on her knees, hands clasped tight enough to hurt. She hadn't cried, not because she didn't feel anything, because there was nothing to release yet. Only tension, only pressure, only the growing certainty that something was wrong. The door opened again. This time, the room didn't shift, because Nia already knew. Before the words, before the explanation, before the silence that followed, she didn't make it. The sentence didn't land all at once. It settled slowly, like something heavy being placed into her chest without asking. Nia didn't move, didn't react immediately, because reaction required understanding, and understanding hadn't caught up yet. "How?" she asked. The word came out quiet, controlled. The doctor didn't answer right away, and that confirmed it. "This wasn't supposed to happen," Nia said. Still no emotion, still no collapse, just clarity forming. "We'll conduct a full internal review," the doctor said. That was the wrong answer. Nia stood, slowly, deliberately. "And then what?" she asked. The doctor hesitated, again, and that hesitation was everything. Nia nodded once, to herself, not to him, because now she understood something important. This wasn't just loss. This was something that was going to be explained away, managed, filed, closed, and she wasn't going to let that happen. Grief didn't come first. Clarity did. That was the part no one talks about. Not the crying, not the collapse, not the breaking, just the moment where everything sharpens, and you realize something doesn't add up. Nia didn't leave the hospital. Not after they told her, not after the room went quiet. Not after the doctor walked away like the conversation had ended. Because for her, it hadn't even started. She stood in the hallway again, the same spot she had been hours earlier, but now, everything looked different. Not because the hospital had changed, because she had. Now she wasn't waiting for answers, she was looking for them. The nurse station sat halfway down the corridor, unattended for a moment. Charts stacked, screens active, information moving without supervision. That was enough. Nia walked toward it. Not rushed, not hesitant, just certain she didn't belong there. But she didn't act like she didn't. That was the difference. She reached for the nearest file, flipped it open. Not her sister's. Didn't matter. She wasn't looking for one record. She was looking for a pattern. Dosages, times, signatures. Her eyes moved quickly, scanning, filtering, rejecting what didn't matter. Then she found it. A line that didn't fit. She frowned, looked closer. Dosage adjustment. Increased. No clear justification. No escalation note. No follow-up. Just changed. Nia flipped to the next file. Same structure. Same type of patient. Same shift window. Another adjustment. Same absence of explanation. Her grip tightened slightly. Not emotional. Focused. Footsteps approached. She closed the file immediately and stepped back just as a nurse returned to the station. "Can I help you?" the nurse asked. Nia met her eyes. "Yes," she said. "I need to see my sister's chart." The nurse hesitated. "I'm not authorized to." "You were authorized to treat her," Nia said. "That means you're part of this." That stopped the nurse, not because of authority, because of precision. "I just need to confirm something," Nia added. Calmer now, measured, controlled. The nurse studied her, then sighed slightly. "Give me a second." She turned, pulled up a file on the screen, then printed a small portion of it. Not the full chart, just enough. She handed it over. "Make it quick." Nia didn't thank her, didn't waste time. She stepped aside and looked down at the page. Her eyes moved fast, until they stopped. There it was. Dosage log. Timestamp. Adjustment. Again. And again. Too frequent. Too close together. No escalation. No override. No correction. Just repetition. Nia's jaw tightened. Because now, this wasn't a mistake. This was a system. She looked back up. Who approved these changes? She asked. The nurse shifted slightly. That would be the attending physician. And who checks that? Nia asked. The nurse hesitated. It goes through review. When? Nia pressed. After discharge. That was it. That was the gap. So nothing gets checked in real time, Nia said. The nurse didn't answer. Because she didn't need to, Nia handed the paper back. Then turned and walked, not toward the exit, not toward the room, toward something else. Because now, she wasn't guessing. She was confirming. The administrative corridor was quieter, cleaner, less movement, more control. Doors closed, access restricted, the kind of place where decisions didn't echo. Nia stopped outside one of the offices. She didn't knock. She opened the door. Inside, a man stood near the desk, reviewing a file. He didn't look up immediately. That alone told her. He wasn't used to being interrupted. "You shouldn't be in here," he said. Calm, controlled, without turning. Nia stepped inside, closed the door behind her. "You shouldn't be signing off on things you're not reviewing," she replied. That got his attention. He turned, and that was the first time she saw him, Adrian Wolf. He didn't look like the kind of man who belonged in a hospital. Not in the way doctors did, not in the way staff did. He looked like someone who came in when something needed to be handled, not treated, handled. "Excuse me?" Adrian said. Nia stepped closer, holding his gaze. "My sister just died," she said. No build-up, no emotion added to it. Just fact. Adrian's expression didn't shift much, but his focus sharpened. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said. It sounded practiced, correct, but empty. Nia didn't react to it. "Her chart shows repeated dosage changes," she said. "No escalation. No review." Adrian watched her now, carefully. "That's not how this works," he said. "No," Nia replied. "It's exactly how it works." That line sat between them, not emotional, not dramatic. Just direct. Adrian set the file in his hand down slowly. Now, he was paying attention. "Where did you get that information?" he asked. Nia didn't answer, because that wasn't the point. "You're reviewing this case," she said. Not a question. A statement. Adrian studied her, then nodded once. "Yes." "Then explain it," Nia said. No hesitation, no softening. "Explain how someone with a manageable condition walks in here and doesn't walk out." Adrian didn't answer immediately, because now, this wasn't routine, this wasn't controlled, this was something else. "Sit down," he said. Nia didn't move. "I'm not here to sit," she replied. "I'm here to understand what happened." Adrian held her gaze, then said, "I'll look into it." That was the moment everything shifted, because that answer wasn't enough. Nia shook her head slightly. "No," she said. Adrian frowned. "No? No," she repeated, then took a step closer, not aggressive, but deliberate. "People like you always say that," she said. That line landed, because it wasn't loud, it wasn't emotional, it was accurate. Adrian's eyes narrowed slightly. "People like me?" he asked. Nia didn't hesitate. "People who decide what matters," she said. A beat, then. "And what disappears?" That was it. That was the moment. Because for the first time, Adrian didn't have an immediate response. Not because he agreed, because something in what she said felt familiar. Adrian didn't dismiss her. That was the first break from pattern. Because men like him, when confronted, usually end the conversation, control the narrative, move on. But he didn't. Not this time. "Stay," Adrian said. Nia didn't move. "I'm not asking you to trust me," he added. "I'm asking you to give me time to verify what you're saying." Nia studied him, not his words, his posture, his stillness, the way he hadn't looked away since she said it. That mattered, but not enough. "You have, until I decide you don't," she said. Not agreement, not cooperation, just allowance. Adrian nodded once, then turned toward the desk, opened the file he had been reviewing before she walked in. Then another, then another. His movements were efficient, but not rushed. That was important, because rushing meant assumption, and right now, he needed precision. Nia didn't sit, didn't relax. She stayed near the door, arms folded again, watching him. Every page he turned, every pause, every shift in his expression. Because this wasn't about whether he looked, it was about whether he saw. Minutes passed, or maybe longer. The room stayed quiet, except for the sound of paper moving, until it stopped. Adrian didn't look up immediately, because when he did, the moment would change, and he knew it. Finally, he spoke. "These timestamps don't align," he said. Nia didn't respond. He flipped another page. Dosage changes were made outside scheduled intervals. Another page, no escalation report. Another, follow-up delayed. He stopped, closed the file, then looked at her, and this time, there was no distance in his expression, just recognition. "This isn't one mistake," Adrian said. "No," Nia replied. "It's not." Adrian nodded slowly, because now, he understood something critical. This wasn't an accident. This was a system functioning exactly the way it had been designed to. "Who's responsible for oversight?" he asked. "Whoever signs off," Nia said. Adrian's jaw tightened. That's not enough. It wasn't enough for her either. That line didn't hit emotionally. It hit structurally, because it wasn't about grief. It was about failure. Adrian turned back to the desk, opened a different file, then another, cross-referencing, comparing, looking for inconsistency. Instead, he found repetition, that pattern. He said quietly. Nia stepped closer, not beside him, not behind him, just within reach of the truth. "What pattern?" she asked. Adrian didn't answer immediately, because now, he wasn't just seeing her sister's case, he was seeing others, different names, Same structure, same gaps, same outcome. This has happened before, he said. Nia didn't react outwardly, but her silence confirmed it. How many? Adrian asked. Nia shook her head slightly. I stopped counting. That was the moment something shifted, not in the room. In him. Adrian leaned back slightly, exhaling slowly. Not frustration, not disbelief. Something else, something heavier. Because now, this wasn't a problem to solve. This was a system to confront. You knew, he said, not accusing, not questioning, confirming. Yes. Adrian nodded, then looked back at the files, then at her, then away, because for the first time, he wasn't trying to stay in control. He was trying to understand the cost. You said people like me decide what disappears, he said. Nia held his gaze. Yes. Adrian didn't respond immediately, because now, that line didn't feel like an accusation. It felt like a description. He closed the file, then stood there for a second, not moving, not speaking, just processing. You should go home, he said finally. Nia didn't move. My sister is still in this building, she replied. Adrian nodded once. That made sense. More than anything else, silence followed. But this time, it wasn't tension. It was weight, shared, unspoken. Hours passed. The hospital grew quieter. Staff reduced. Movement slowed. But neither of them left. Adrian stayed in that office, reviewing, cross-checking, digging deeper, because once he saw it, he couldn't unsee it. Nia stayed in the hallway, then the room, then back again, not pacing, not restless, just present, because leaving meant accepting, and she wasn't ready for that. At some point, the distance between them stopped feeling necessary. Adrian stepped out of the office. Nia was still there, sitting now, head lowered, hands clasped tightly. She was right, he said. Nia looked up. She wasn't supposed to die, Adrian added. That was the first real acknowledgement. Not corporate, not controlled. Real. Nia studied him, carefully, because this part mattered more than anything he had said before. And now? She asked. Adrian didn't answer immediately, because now, there wasn't a clean response, no controlled outcome, no clear next step. I need to see how far this goes, he said. Nia shook her head slightly. That's not enough. Adrian met her gaze. It's where I start. That was the truth, not satisfying, not complete, but real. Silence settled again, but this time, it felt different, less guarded, more exposed. You don't look like someone who expected this, Nia said. Adrian let out a quiet breath. I didn't. Then why are you still here? She asked. That question mattered, because it cut past everything else. Adrian didn't answer right away. Then, I don't know, he said. That was it. No control, no certainty, just honesty. And something about that shifted the space between them, not into comfort, not into connection, but into something real. They weren't on opposite sides anymore. Not fully. They were standing inside the same problem. The night stretched longer, quieter, heavier. At some point, the files stopped moving, the questions stopped forming, and all that was left was the weight of what they already knew. Nia leaned back against the wall, closing her eyes for a second, not sleeping, just letting the tension settle. Adrian watched her, not directly, but enough, because now, she wasn't just the person who confronted him. She was the reason he stayed. You should rest, he said. Nia let out a quiet breath. I don't think I can. That's not sustainable, Adrian replied. Nia looked at him. Neither is this. That ended the conversation, because it was true. The moment that followed wasn't planned, wasn't meaningful in the way people expect, wasn't built on anything solid. It was just two people who had been holding everything together for too long and didn't, for a second. No words, no build-up, no expectation, just proximity, exhaustion, and the absence of control. It didn't last long. It didn't need to, because it wasn't about what it meant. It was about what it was. And by the time either of them stepped back, it was already something that couldn't be undone. No promises followed, no conversation about it, no attempt to define it, because neither of them were those people. By morning, the hospital returned to routine, movement, voices, structure, but something had changed, not in the building, not in the system, in them, and neither of them said it out loud, because some things don't need confirmation. The present didn't feel the same, not after remembering, not after understanding. Adrian stood in his office, the city stretching beyond the glass like it always had. Nothing outside had changed, but inside, everything had. The memory didn't come back all at once, not clearly, not in full detail, but the weight of it, that returned, the decisions, the files, the moment where he chose containment over exposure. He didn't need every detail, because he already knew what mattered. He had seen it, and he had buried it. Adrian didn't move toward the desk, because sitting meant settling, and there was nothing stable about this. Behind him, Lila remained where she was, silent, waiting, not for instruction, for confirmation, because something had changed, and she knew it. "You told me it would protect the company," Adrian said. His voice was calm, too calm. Lila didn't hesitate. "Yes." Adrian nodded once, still facing the glass, and I believed that. Yes. That part didn't need explanation. It made sense. Strategically, efficiently, coldly. "What you didn't say," Adrian continued, "was what it would cost." Lila didn't respond, because now, that answer didn't belong to her. Adrian turned slowly, not sharp, not aggressive, measured. "How many?" he asked. The room went still. Lila didn't answer immediately, not because she didn't know, because saying it made it real. "More than we reported," she said. "That's not a number." Lila held his gaze. "It's not one incident." That was enough, because Adrian understood what she wasn't saying. Not one mistake, not one failure, not one life. A system, repeated, sustained, allowed. Adrian exhaled slowly, then asked the question that didn't need an answer. "How many died because I said nothing?" The silence that followed was the answer. Not loud, not dramatic, just present. Adrian didn't move, because now there was nothing to calculate, nothing to optimize, nothing to justify, just consequence. He turned away from her again, not to avoid, to think, because now, the decision in front of him wasn't complicated. It was simple, and that made it harder. "If this comes out," Lila said carefully, "it won't stop at the medical division." Adrian didn't respond. "It will affect everything," she continued. "Partnerships, investors, regulatory bodies. Still, nothing. The company won't survive it," she added. That was the real statement, the real line. Adrian nodded once. "I know." He didn't argue, didn't challenge it, didn't pretend otherwise, because she was right. Exposing the truth wouldn't fix anything immediately. It wouldn't bring anyone back. It wouldn't restore trust. It would destroy what he built, piece by piece. Lila watched him carefully now, because this was the moment. "You can contain it again," she said. Adrian looked at her, really looked this time. "No," he said. That was it. No explanation, no hesitation, just decision. Lila didn't move, didn't argue, because she knew this version of him wasn't negotiating. "Reinstate the audit," Adrian said. "That data is gone," she replied. "Then rebuild it. That will take time. Then start now." Lila studied him, because this wasn't procedure, this wasn't strategy, this was something else. "And the external exposure?" she asked. Adrian didn't look away. "We don't control it." That was the shift, the complete one, because for the first time, Adrian wasn't trying to manage the outcome. He was accepting it. Lila nodded once, slow. "I'll begin the process," she said. Adrian didn't respond, because now, he wasn't thinking about the company. He was thinking about something else. The hospital, the files, the night, Nia, Micah. Not emotionally, not yet. structurally, consequentially, because now, those weren't separate parts of his life, they were connected, and that connection was his responsibility. Lila turned to leave, then paused. "This will change everything," she said. Adrian nodded. "It should." She didn't say anything else, and when the door closed behind her, the room felt different. Not empty, not quiet, honest. For the first time, there was nothing hidden in it. Adrian walked back to the desk, looked at the space where the backup system used to exist, then sat, not to work, not to plan, to accept, because now, the version of him that made that decision, and the version of him sitting here, were the same person, and there was no distance left between them. The fallout didn't arrive all at once. It started quietly, which made it worse. The first report didn't even mention Adrian, just a small article buried under financial updates, a note about internal inconsistencies within a private medical network. No accusations, no conclusions, just questions. Adrian read it without reacting, because he knew this was how it began, not with exposure, with curiosity. By the second day, the questions multiplied, different sources, different angles, all circling the same issue: patient outcomes, reporting discrepancies, internal reviews that didn't match documented timelines, still no direct link, still no name, but that didn't matter. Because Adrian understood something most people didn't. Truth doesn't need to be announced. It builds pressure, and eventually, it forces its way out. Inside the company, nothing looked broken. Meetings continued. Decisions moved forward. Numbers still updated on screens, but the tone had changed. Subtle, controlled, but present. People weren't asking questions out loud. They were waiting, watching. Adrian walked through it without slowing down, without acknowledging it, because reacting too early would confirm too much. In the conference room, the atmosphere held tension under control. Executives sat in their usual positions, devices open, expressions neutral. Adrian took his seat at the head of the table. No delay, no hesitation. "Proceed," he said. The presentation began. Numbers, growth projections, risk assessments, all the things that used to matter. But now, they felt disconnected, because every number on the screen was built on something he already knew was compromised. Halfway through the presentation, Adrian raised his hand. The room went still immediately. "Stop," he said. The speaker paused. Everyone looked at him. Adrian leaned back slightly, not relaxed. Focused. "These projections assume stability," he said. No one responded. "They assume continuity," he added. Still silence. Adrian looked around the room, one by one, measuring reactions. That assumption is no longer valid. That was the first shift. Not dramatic, but irreversible. One of the executives leaned forward slightly. "Is there something we should be aware of?" he asked. Adrian held his gaze. Yes, that word changed the room, but Adrian didn't rush to explain, didn't soften it, didn't control the reaction. "An internal review is being reconstructed," he said. The phrasing mattered, not hidden, not exposed, just stated. "What kind of review?" someone asked. Adrian didn't look away. "Medical division." There it was, out in the open. Silence followed, longer this time. Because now, this wasn't speculation, this was confirmation. "What's the risk level?" another voice asked. Adrian didn't hesitate. "High." That was enough, because in rooms like this, people don't need full explanations. They understand implication. "What's the exposure timeline?" someone else asked. Adrian leaned forward slightly, hands resting on the table. "We don't control that." That answer landed harder than anything else, because it meant this wasn't containable. The room shifted, not physically, mentally. "Then we need a mitigation strategy," one of them said quickly. Adrian shook his head once. No. That stopped everything. No follow-up, no clarification. Just, "No, we need to be prepared," the same voice insisted. Adrian met his gaze. "You need to understand something," he said. The room went still again. "This isn't a situation we manage. A pause. Then, "It's one we answer for." That was it. That was the line. Because now, the structure they had built was no longer about control. It was about accountability. And that was something none of them were prepared for. The meeting didn't collapse. It didn't explode. It ended quietly, because there was nothing left to say. By the end of the week, the reports changed tone. No longer cautious, no longer questioning. Now, they connected. Data matched across sources. Patterns formed. Names began to surface. Not Adrian's yet, but close enough. Investors started asking for clarification. Partners requested internal reviews. Legal teams moved without waiting for instruction. And through all of it, Adrian didn't interfere, didn't redirect, didn't contain. He watched, because for the first time, he wasn't trying to control the outcome. He was letting it reach him. Inside the company, the structure began to shift. Not collapse, not yet, but weaken. Decisions slowed. Confidence fractured. Alignment broke. People who had followed direction without question started hesitating, not out loud, but in action. And that was enough. Lila stood in his office again, not holding a tablet this time, not delivering updates, just standing. "The board is requesting a formal statement," she said. Adrian didn't look up immediately. "On what?" he asked. "On your involvement." There it was. Not distant anymore, not indirect. Personal. Adrian leaned back slightly in his chair, not avoiding. Processing. "And what do they expect me to say?" he asked. Lila didn't answer right away. Because this wasn't about expectation. "It depends," she said. "On what?" "On whether you're protecting the company." A pause. "Then?" "Or exposing it." Adrian nodded once. "Prepare both," he said. That answer caught her off guard. "You won't use both," she said. "No," Adrian replied. He stood, slowly. "But I'll decide which one matters." Lila studied him carefully, because now there was no version of this that ended cleanly. "This will destroy everything you built," she said. Adrian met her gaze. "I know." No hesitation, no denial, just acceptance. Because now, that wasn't the question anymore. The question was, what deserved to survive? And for the first time, the answer wasn't the company. The statement wasn't dramatic. No cameras, no stage, no attempt to control how it would be received. Adrian stood in his office, the same place where every major decision of his life had been made. And for the first time, he didn't prepare a version of the truth. He just gave it. The report was released internally first, then externally. No delay, no filtering, no protection. Everything. The audit, the patterns, the failures, the decisions. His decision. The reaction didn't take long. It didn't need to. Markets responded first, fast, unforgiving. Numbers dropped, not gradually, sharply. Partners withdrew, not all at once, but enough to shift the foundation. Then came the statements, controlled, distanced, carefully worded. No one defended him. No one attacked him either. They separated. That was worse. Because silence, in situations like this, is agreement. Inside the company, structure gave way to survival. People stopped thinking long-term. They focused on position, protection, exit. Adrian didn't intervene, didn't attempt to stabilize anything, didn't call emergency meetings, didn't redirect strategy, because that would have meant he was still trying to hold it together. And he wasn't. He stayed in his office through most of it, not hiding, not avoiding, just present, watching something he built lose its shape. Lila came in once, didn't speak immediately, didn't offer updates. "There's still time to control the narrative," she said eventually. Adrian didn't look up. "No," he replied. That answer didn't carry frustration, or anger, or regret, just finality. Lila studied him for a moment longer, then nodded once. Because now, she understood something clearly. This wasn't a miscalculation. It was a choice, and choices like that don't get reversed. Days passed. Then more. The headlines shifted from speculation to certainty. His name appeared. Connected, documented, not exaggerated, not distorted, accurate. That was the difference. And accuracy doesn't leave room for defense. Adrian read every report, not because he needed to, because he refused to look away. Every number, every detail, every outcome, not as a CEO, as a man who had made a decision and was now living inside its consequences. The office felt different now, not empty, unclaimed, because power, once it breaks, doesn't return the same way. Eventually, Adrian left. No announcement, no statement, just left. The city didn't react, didn't shift, didn't acknowledge what had happened. It moved the same way it always did. And that was the final reminder. Everything he built was never as permanent as it felt. The penthouse was quiet when he returned, not tense, not uncertain, just quiet. Nia was near the window, Micah in her arms, the same position as before, but something had changed, not in her posture, not in her expression, in what she expected. She didn't turn immediately, didn't ask where he had been, didn't ask what he had done, because she already knew. The news had reached her, not through headlines, through understanding. Adrian stepped inside, closed the door behind him. He didn't speak, not right away, because this moment wasn't something he could control with words. Nia turned slowly, looked at him, not searching, not questioning, measuring. "It's done," Adrian said, simple, direct. Nia held his gaze. "Yes," she replied. That was it. No acknowledgement, no reaction, just confirmation. Adrian didn't step closer, didn't reach for anything, didn't try to close the distance, because now he understood something he didn't before. Presence wasn't something you take, it's something you earn. Days passed, then more. Nothing dramatic changed. No conversations about the past, no attempts to define what they were, no expectations, just consistency. Adrian stayed, not in her space, not in his old patterns, just around. He fixed small things, adjusted what needed adjusting, moved carefully, not performing, not proving, learning. Nia didn't interfere, didn't encourage, didn't reject. She watched, because this part wasn't about what he said, it was about what he did. When no one was asking him to, Micah grew more aware, more responsive, and Adrian never reached for him, not once, because he knew that wasn't his decision to make. One evening, the light shifted across the room, soft, quiet. Nia stood near the window again, Micah resting against her shoulder. Adrian moved in the background, not distant, not close, present. That was the difference now. Nia watched him for a moment, longer than usual, not evaluating, not testing, just observing. Then, without warning, without explanation, she walked toward him. Adrian noticed, but didn't move, didn't assume. She stopped in front of him and placed Micah gently into his arms. No words, no instructions, no reassurance, just action. Adrian froze for a second, not out of fear, out of understanding, because this wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't acceptance, it wasn't closure, it was something harder. Permission. Micah shifted slightly, then settled. Adrian adjusted his hold carefully, not like something fragile, like something that mattered. Nia didn't smile, didn't soften, didn't step closer. She just watched, because this moment wasn't about what Adrian had done right. It was about who he had chosen to become after everything fell apart. And that kind of change doesn't erase anything. It doesn't fix what was broken. It doesn't undo what was lost. But it creates something else, something that didn't exist before. A chance, not at redemption, at responsibility. And sometimes, that's the only truth that matters. Some men become fathers by blood. Others become one by the choices they make after everything else is gone.